First of all, I just want to say please forgive the whirring of my computer, but I've just written everything down because otherwise I'd forget. I have a story to tell, and typing it out first was the only way I could make sure to get everything down on paper. Make sure that I didn't miss anything. So, I'm sorry that the laptop sound might disturb you. So, this is a story from my childhood, and it's about bedtime. Bedtime is supposed to be a happy event for a child, but for me it was terrifying. While some children might complain about being put to bed before they finish watching a film or playing their favourite video game, when I was a child, nighttime or bedtime was something to truly fear. And somewhere in the back of my mind, it still is. So, as someone who's trained in the sciences, I can't prove that what happened to me was objectively real. But I can swear that what I experienced was genuine horror. A fear which, in my life, I'm glad to say, has never been equalled. So I'll relate it to you all now, as best as I can, and make of it what you will, but I'll be glad to just get it off my chest. I can't remember exactly when it started, but my apprehension towards falling asleep seemed to correspond with my being moved into a room of my own. I was 8 years old at the time, and until then I'd shared a room quite happily with my older brother. As is perfectly understandable for a boy 5 years my senior, my brother eventually wished for a room of his own. And as a result, I was given the room at the back of the house. It was a small, narrow yet oddly elongated room, large enough for a bed and a couple of chests of drawers, but not much else. Couldn't really complain because even at that age I understood that we didn't have a large house, and I had no real cause to be disappointed as my family was both loving and caring. It was a happy childhood during the day. A solitary window looked out onto our back garden, nothing out of the ordinary, but even during the day the light which crept into that room seemed almost hesitant. As my brother was given a new bed, I was given the bunk beds which we used to share. And while I was upset about sleeping on my own, I was excited about the thought of being able to sleep in the top bunk. It seemed far more adventurous to me. From the very first night, I remember a strange feeling of unease creeping slowly from the back of my mind. I lay on the top bunk, staring down at my dolls and my toys that were just strewn across the floor, and couldn't help but feel that my eyes were slowly being drawn to the bottom bunk, as if something was moving in the corner of my eye, something which didn't wish to be seen. The bunk was empty, impeccably made, with a dark blue blanket tucked in neatly, partially covering 2 bland white pillows. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was a child, and the noise slipping under my door from my parents' television bathed me in a warm sense of safety and well-being, and I fell asleep. When you awaken from a deep sleep to something moving or stirring, it can take a few moments for you to truly understand what's happening. And the fog of sleep hangs over your eyes, and even ears when lucid. Something was moving. There was no doubt about that. At first, I wasn't sure what it was. Everything was dark, almost pitch black, but There was enough light creeping in from outside to outline that narrowly suffocating room. Two thoughts appeared in my mind almost simultaneously. The first was that my parents were in bed because the rest of the house both lay in darkness and silence. The second thought turned to the noise, a noise which had obviously woken me. As the last cobwebs of sleep withered from my mind, the noise took on a more familiar form. Sometimes the simplest of sounds can be the most unnerving. A cold wind whistling through the trees outside, a neighbour's footsteps uncomfortably close, or, in this case, the simple sound of bedsheets rustling in the dark. That was it. Bedsheets rustling in the dark, as if some disturbed sleeper was attempting to get all too comfortable in the bottom bunk. I lay there in disbelief, thinking that the noise was either my imagination or perhaps just my pet cat finding somewhere comfortable to spend the night. And it was then that I noticed my door shut as it had been as I'd fallen asleep. Perhaps my mum had checked in on me and the cat had sneaked into my room then. Yeah, that must have been it. I turned to face the wall, closing my eyes in vain, hoping that I could fall back to sleep. As I moved, the rustling noise from underneath me ceased. I thought that I must have disturbed my cat, but quickly I realised that the visitor in the bottom bunk was much less mundane than my pets trying to sleep, and much more sinister. As if alerted to and disgruntled by my presence, the disturbed sleeper began to toss and turn violently, like a child having a tantrum in their bed. I could hear the sheets twist and turn with increasing ferocity, and fear then gripped me. Not like the subtle sense of unease I'd experienced earlier, but now potent and terrifying. My heart raced as my eyes panicked, scanning the almost impenetrable darkness. I let out a cry. As most young girls do, I instinctively shouted for my mum. I could hear something stir on the other side of the house, but as I began to breathe a sigh of relief that my parents were coming to save me, the bunk bed suddenly started to shake violently, as if gripped by an earthquake, scraping against the wall. I could hear the sheets below me thrashing around as if tormented by malice, and I did not want to jump down to safety as I feared the thing in the bottom bunk would reach out and grab me, pulling me into the darkness. So I stayed there, white knuckles clenching my own blanket like a shroud of protection. The wait seemed like an eternity. The door finally and thankfully burst open, and I lay bathed in white light from the bottom bunk. The resting place of my unwanted visitor lay empty and peaceful. I cried and my mother consoled me. Tears of fear, followed by relief, streamed down my face, yet, although all of the horror and relief, I did not tell her why I was so upset. I can't explain it, but it was as though whatever had been in my bunk would return if I even so much as spoke of it or uttered a single syllable of its existence. Whether that was the truth, I don't know. But as a child, I felt that unseen menace remained close, listening. My mother lay in the empty bunk, promising to stay there until morning. Eventually, my anxiety diminished. Tiredness pushed me back towards sleep, but I remained restless, waking several times momentarily to the sound of rustling bedsheets. I remember the next day wanting to go anywhere, be anywhere but in that narrow, suffocating room. It was a Saturday, and I played outside quite happily with my friends. Although our house was not large, we were lucky to have a long sloping garden in the back. We played there often, as much of it was overgrown, and we could hide in the bushes, we could climb in the huge sycamore tree which towered above all else, and easily imagine ourselves in the throes of a grand adventure in some untamed exotic land. And as fun as it all was, occasionally my eye would turn to that small window. Ordinary, slight and innocuous. But for me, that thin boundary was a looking glass into a strange, cold pocket of dread. Outside, the lush green surroundings of our garden, filled with smiling faces of my friends, could not extinguish the creeping feeling clawing its way up my spine. Each hair standing on end. The feeling of something in that room, watching me play, waiting for the night when I would be alone, eagerly